Hey there, Sprouts! Today we are going to talk about some neat tricks on how we can make our boss fights more dramatic and exciting using momentum. If you're anything like me, you love a good boss fight. A climactic battle where our players get to throw out all their biggest attacks and we get to unleash whatever nightmarish nemesis our over-caffeinated brains have pulled from the bestiary at around 2 a.m. in the morning. But there is more to crafting an epic boss fight than just dropping a dragon in front of the party and rolling some dice. So today I want to talk about one of my favorite ways to improve boss fights. Momentum. Quick disclaimer, I'm going to frame this advice through the lens of traditional tabletop role-playing games such as Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, or any of the Warhammer RPGs, but it's just as valid for any role-playing game where our players face off against a boss that is just way bigger and more powerful than them. So let's grab our dice and get into it. Number 1. Selling impact. Picture the scene. Gibbleflip, the halfling bard, has just found himself in a bit of a tough spot. He pissed off a wyvern. The towering draconic beast, the size of a small tavern, lashes out with its serpentine tail. A snaking mass of muscle and iron-hard scales slams into the halfling with the weight of a small tree behind it. Dice are rolled, Gibbleflip is hit, and he takes 2d8 plus 8 blunt damage, says, ouch, and then he just stands there, perfectly fine. Something feels a bit off, doesn't it? This little halfling just took about 20,000 pounds of pissed off wyvern to the chin and didn't even budge an inch. Might as well have been a stiff fart, honestly. And that's kind of anticlimactic. The missing ingredient here is momentum. Where did it all go? Unless Gibbleflip is some kind of demigod, or maybe has an immovable rod for a spine, all the momentum of the attack has to have gone somewhere. If our players are fighting a boss that's way bigger and stronger than they are, one of the easiest ways to add momentum is to add knockback or knockdowns to their attacks. This can really make it feel like they're being hit by something with proper weight and momentum behind it. Returning to the scene, alternatively, Gibbleflip takes the tail to the chest, takes 2d8 plus 8 damage, and is launched 30 feet across the room, landing hard on his back and skidding to a halt amid a cloud of dust. That'll teach him to piss off a wyvern. Knockback attacks can also add some extra fun layer of positioning to certain fights. If the players learn that our wyvern only has knockback attacks on its tail, then they know to avoid its butt. And that can be a lot of fun when they're starting to puzzle out how to deal with particular large monsters during a fight. On to number 2, storytelling. Think about how boring some of our favorite fight scenes would be from TV, movies, etc. if characters involved all just ran up to each other, stood still, and traded blows over and over until one of them fell down. That sounds kind of boring, right? But we see this happen all the time in TTRPG boss fights. 3 to 5 player characters, they just surround the boss and attack over and over until someone dies. I call these piñata fights. There's dull as a bag of rocks because there's no story to them. To me, personally, a good fight should feel like a bloody mix between a dance and a tug of war. Combatants should move back and forth, depending on who has the upper hand at that moment in the fight. Next time we're watching a cool fight scene in a movie or a TV show, stop and think about how the fight choreographers have used momentum to tell a story. Whenever a villain has the upper hand, each attack they land pushes the hero back, even just a small bit, a couple of steps. A single grid space is often enough to give a player pause. Imagine the scene. The dark paladin swings their cursed mace in a devastating arc, clashing against your shield. Despite your best efforts, you feel yourself giving ground. If the boss is even more particularly skilled or agile, they could even circle around the heroes and strike them from the side or the back, pushing them in unexpected directions. And if they have a multi-attack, we can do this multiple times in a turn to really make it feel like the players are defending against this relentless storm of attacks. If the players are being pushed and pulled around the battlefield by a boss, it really sells this idea that the boss is the one in control. And it's a great trick if we still want to use momentum in our boss fights when the boss is the same size as our player characters. They may not be able to punch a character across a room like a wyvern unless they are a demigod or maybe a Dragon Ball Z character, but they can still control the momentum of the fight, really get this air of superiority by forcing characters to move around the scene at their whim. And then, the really beautiful thing about this trick is that we can do the opposite when the players gain the upper hand. Maybe they've uncovered a weakness in the boss's strategy, or maybe they start weaving their attacks together with an ally into interesting combos. Maybe something inspiring like a friend in need or words of encouragement at the right time pushes them to go all out. Or maybe they simply break through the boss's guard with a lucky critical hit. As GMs and writers, we can reward all these powerful story moments by letting the players push the boss back a step or two, knocking them down onto their back or their knees, or even just stopping the boss's relentless attacks. Players love it when they feel like they have finally managed to turn the tides on a boss fight. And then, of course, just when the players think they're kicking the boss's ass, we flip it back on them. Just like the players, the boss can suddenly get serious, pull out a wild card or a dirty trick, or unleash their full power, and start pushing the players back once more. Each time we do this back and forth, we're building up storytelling and dramatic tension in the fight. If you're looking for inspiration, the subway fight in The Matrix is a masterclass in using momentum to tell a compelling story in a fight scene, so check that one out. Number 3, environmental interactions. So now that we've got all this exciting momentum in our boss fight, we want to have a battlefield that takes advantage of it. We could knock our players around a blank room, but it's way more fun if we get to break things while we're at it. Think of even the most basic environmental features, such as ledges, pitfalls, crumbling walls, or fragile furniture. Normally, features like this might be overlooked by players. After all, they're not going to just walk into a spiked wall or a pitfall trap on their own. But these features all become exciting toys the instant we start adding momentum to a fight. What if a dangerous duel is taking place on a very narrow bridge with sheer drops on either side, where every step backwards could be the one that sends a character plummeting to their death? Or we could even add extra damage to some of these features. If a character is pushed or thrown into them, furniture covered in bottles, plates, and other sharp things could rain down upon them. Fireplaces or wall sconces could light a character on fire. Staircases even can become great fun if a character just gets shoved down them and they go tumbling and rolling to the bottom. And if we want to get even more crazy with our environment, we can start adding counter momentum to environmental features themselves. Maybe there's a fire that rapidly spreads through the area, making the arena smaller and smaller every round. Or maybe they're fighting in a crumbling tower where every grid space has a 10% chance of crumbling beneath our players' feet and leaving an open pit to the floors below. Or maybe something crazy like a huge pendulum that swings back and forth in the middle of the room, knocking down anyone who's caught in its path. Maybe the characters themselves are fighting atop platforms or vehicles that are moving themselves round in circles back and forth, bringing enemies and allies closer and further away each turn, changing the battlefield on a moment-per-moment basis. There's really no end to the amount of interesting and exciting ways we can use environmental momentum to make an otherwise simple fight really exciting to interact with. If you want some pretty out there examples of this, check out some of the truly physics-defying fight scenes in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. They do a really good job, especially over the course of the series, of taking what should be a relatively simple sword duel between two characters and elevating to just a marvelously stupid spectacle of momentum and character drama. Is it realistic to have two characters dueling atop a detached water wheel and scrabbling over and around each other for a MacGuffin as the whole thing rolls through a forest? No, not in the slightest. But your players would remember something like that forever. Okay, I'm going to give you a wee bonus tip here, and this one is particularly for you GMs who are listening. If you have some players who, for one reason or another, are a little too focused on their big spells and cool attacks that they have maybe forgotten about a vital clue or a MacGuffin in the scene that's needed to defeat a boss. Well, you want a nice little trick? Why not try using momentum to remind them of its existence in a fun way? The Wyvern's attack sends Gibbleflip crashing through a flimsy wall into an adjoining room. The party skipped this room earlier and got straight to the Wyvern killing. But hey, Gibbleflip's here now. There's no problem describing what they see. As the dust settles, Gibbleflip sees something. A bunch of large spherical objects nestled amid the debris. Wyvern eggs. The one thing the Wyvern would never risk harming. This is another one of those funny tropes that actually happens in film a lot. The hero takes a big hit and slides across the floor and lands right next to a fallen weapon or a lever or a MacGuffin that'll help them defeat the boss. And as I always say, if it's good enough for a dumb action movie, it's good enough for the table. Sure, it's a bit corny, but if the alternative is letting our players wail on a boss for 10 rounds until they get frustrated and just ask you for the solution, well, I say there's no harm in giving them a wee nudge in the right direction. And there we have it. That's my top tips for improving your boss fights with momentum. In summary, we can use it to sell the impact of giant monsters. It can tell a dramatic story of power dynamics. We can add it to an environment to make simple fights tactical and exciting. And if push comes to shove, we can use it to give players a wee nudge and land them in the right place at the right time. If you have any examples of how we can use momentum in our games, leave them in the comments and let me know if there are any other topics you'd like me to cover in future videos. Until next time, take care, Sprats.